Hi, this is Donna Aust, and today I'd like to talk about fear and courage. If the fears we had before this pandemic weren't bad enough, now many of us face new fears, terrifying fears. Fear of what the future holds, fear that life will never be the same. We fear the fear. The Bible has a lot to say about fear. In fact, do not fear appears over 103 times in the scriptures. When Joshua was being commissioned by God to go to the promised land, he says to Joshua in chapter 1, verse 9, "Have not I commanded you, be strong and courageous, do not be frightened and do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." A better translation of do not be frightened and discouraged is do not let fear conquer you. So it's not that we don't or won't have fear. God knows we fear. This verse is telling us to not let the fear conquer us. Therefore, true courage is facing our fears, walking through them, toward them, head on in God's strength, knowing He is with us wherever we go. One book over from Joshua is the book of Judges, and there we meet Gideon, a man who is minding his own business, threshing wheat in a winepress to hide from the Midianites, a fierce enemy of Israel. So it is in this winepress an angel of the Lord appears to Gideon and says in chapter 6, verse 12, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." Now we might miss the irony of this scene, but any farmer can tell you that threshing wheat in a winepress is absurd. In the ancient world, threshing wheat was done by tossing grain in the air so that the wind could catch the lighter, unusable chaff and leave the good, heavier grain to fall to the ground, separating the grain from the chaff. But wine presses are underground. There is no wind. So trying to thresh wheat in a wine press is like trying to fly a kite in a cave. So why is Gideon threshing wheat in a wine press? Because he is terrified. He is terrified of the Midianites. But when the angel approaches Gideon and calls him a mighty man of valor, I'm sure Gideon is looking over his shoulder to see if the angel is talking to someone else, because I'm the guy hiding in a cave. God accepts Gideon just as he is, scared and afraid, but equips him to do exactly what God calls him to do, to defeat the Midianites. Gideon trusts God. He trusts that He is with him. God uses our fear and weakness in the same way. It is in our very weakness that He is strong. It is in our fearfulness that He proves Himself more than able. It has been said that God doesn't call us because we're able. He enables us because we are called to trust Him, even in our deepest fears, and trust Him to know He is with us. I am no stranger to fear. I had lots of anxieties and fears growing up, and one of my fears was public speaking. This fear extended to fear of speaking to those in authority. And if you know anything about fear, you know how debilitating and crippling fear can be. Fear keeps us from doing the very thing God calls us to. I knew God didn't want me to run from this fear, but to push into it, to face it. And when I began to see myself as God did, I began to trust in His strength and His power and knowledge that God was with me. And because of the Holy Spirit, He was also within me. We see this in Peter throughout the Gospels. When Peter denied Christ 3 times, it was because he was terrified of getting arrested, imprisoned, or killed for admitting that he even knew Jesus. But 50 days later, Peter gives one of the most powerful sermons in the Bible on the day of Pentecost, and thousands come to Christ. How? God was with him and in him. It was on that day that Peter, the disciples, and many others were filled with the Holy Spirit, and the Spirit of God gave Peter great courage to proclaim the gospel. When my sons were little, they would often jump into our bed in the middle of the night because they were terrified of a bad dream they had, or a loud noise they heard, or a thunderstorm that woke them. But once they fell into our arms, their fear melted away. And because they were with us, they felt safe and protected and no longer afraid. That is a picture of how God is. He says, I am with you. Trust me. Fall into my arms, and I will give you the courage you need to battle whatever challenge you face.